Luke Sheehy from the Australian Technology Network is with us, and I would have thought, Luke, that you've got reasons to be intrigued and perhaps even pleased with the paper that the Minister is announcing today.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for having me. And I think it's a pretty exciting paper. It's a big one, and it certainly has enough in it to feed a reform agenda for the Commonwealth and the states, for that matter, for, I would say, the next 10, 20 years. And to your point, I'm pretty pleased that a lot of ATN's thinking has made its way into the language and some key priorities. I think the immediate actions are really fantastic because it's dealing with some of that unfinished business from the Job Ready Graduates package. Giving all First Nations students the opportunity of a university degree is just, it's fundamental if we're going to close the gap. I can't believe we've waited so long to do it, but I'm glad that we're finally doing it. Extension of things like the regional university study hubs to the outer suburbs of our growing cities, great. Abolition of that, what was just a mean 50% failure rule, gone. That is great news. I think as well, we've got some fantastic stuff around governance that the Minister can work with the states and territories on. We've already got a great sector, great governance in our sector, but if we can improve it, that's a good thing. And then finally, the kicker in the immediate actions, Stephen, is this extension of the CGS guarantee, or the Commonwealth Grant Scheme guarantee, which was put in place as an emergency setting during COVID. It gives us that certainty and stability for the next couple of years while we contemplate these big 81 considerations. And that's what's the exciting part. There's integration between the vocational education system and the higher education system, which will lead to, I'm hoping, a really considered debate and policy development for lifelong learning, which is well overdue in Australia. I think there's excellent stuff on the role of international education, obviously equity and participation, skills. The word skills appears a lot, and that's ATN bread and butter, and we're delighted by it. So yeah, you're right. But it's a big one, and I think what it's done is it's articulated a whole series of key ideas for reform, and the sector now, we've got to step up and do some homework with the Commonwealth and make these ideas into realities for reform.
There's a bunch of stuff in there that will challenge some. I think everybody pretty much will like the idea of a tertiary education commission, but I wonder if they're all going to be pleased with what is described as a universal learning entitlement, which sounds rather to me like a voucher.
Well, firstly, I think the commission's a good idea. We have had commissions in Australia before, which I think Mary O'Kane's rightly pointed out, but as long as it's got a decent job to do, and I think if you look at 81 considerations for reform, it pretty much does have some serious work to do. So we will back that in and make sure that the right people are involved in it. Universal study entitlement, for me, the kicker in that is universal. We want to move our post-secondary education system to a universal system. We went from small amount of participation in our higher education system to a high participation model, particularly after Bradley and those reforms, and HELP and HEX as well, but before that with Dawkins and previous reforms. But we want universal access. Why? Because everyone's going to need skills to get jobs in the modern economy. So universal is important. Study entitlement, we've already been debating what that looks like. I think it's either subsidies, it's student contributions. Is it a voucher? Look, we need to learn the lessons from some of those policy experiments in the past, particularly in the vocational system, Stephen. So, we've got some runs on the board, we've got some battle scars, and I'm sure we'll get the settings right. I'm pretty confident. But the universal thing is the kicker for me, and that's what gives me the great level of excitement. And
a possibility of Commonwealth-supported places to TAFE, and specifically to TAFE, not to training.
Well, I've had a long-held view, and I think many of the ATN vice-chancellors and senior people across our network have had a long-held view that, to get a better post-secondary system in Australia, we have to revitalise TAFE. It's the big ticket, major requirement of any Minister of Education to take TAFE and bring it back to the centre of the public system. Universities, it doesn't mean that they're taking away from us, and it shouldn't mean they take away from universities. We can do both things at the same time. A better idea around subsidies, a kind of fairer system around who gets subsidised for what. is important. And the closer you bring those two systems together, the more equitable we're going to treat students. And I think that's a good thing anyway. I think this has been unfinished business from Bradley. And, you know, here we are 15 years later, and there's some really good stuff in this paper to help achieve that.
And you couldn't run a universal learning entitlement and it be universal without including training.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, you know, not every single job is going to require a higher education qualification. A majority of them will into the future, but a big minority will require vocational education and training. I think the other exciting thing about this universal approach to post-secondary education is the way the ATN's describing it, is that new type of qualifications have been flagged. Yep. Those that are a hybrid between vocational education and higher education. That is bread and butter for our learning designers across the ATN. We've got the most iconic dual sector university, if I can be bold, in the country, in RMIT in my network. Some very clever people there getting very excited about what we can do in this space. So I think, you know, if we get this right, if we engage properly and we're mature about it, we're able to cope with some of the things we don't like, but we're able to engage really fulsomely on all of these 81 considerations. I think it's a pretty exciting time for us.
A major achievement if it happens, and it'll be the government after last before it finishes. Government after next. So.
I think, look, it's clear that, you know, giving us a 2-year extension of the Commonwealth guarantee is a clear indication from the minister that this isn't all going to be wrapped up in one piece of legislation, which we've probably seen in the past. And I think there's a limitation of some good ideas from previous ministers that died on the floor of the Senate. And I think people know that. And I think, you know, we can develop these ideas into serious policy reform ideas that are costed, that look at like the unintended consequences and the intended consequences and how much they cost, and get them into serious reform legislation, bills, etc. Over a period of years. There will be an election sometime in the next couple of years as well. We'll give out our short 3-year federal term. So I think some of these will be put to the people at an election. Some will be rolled out immediately. So, you know, we're going to have a lot of homework over the next couple of years, I think.
Visionary policy, bold politics?
Well, you know, I've always thought Paul Keating was right, that good policy makes good politics. So, you know, in our space, there's a lot of ideas that could inform really good policy in this paper. So, you know, that should be attractive to the Australian people. And I've always encouraged education ministers from both the Coalition and Labor to put bold ideas to an election so people can endorse them. I think we need more higher education and more vocational education, TAFE and post-secondary education discussed at an election campaign. Maybe I'm a nerd, but maybe I think that's probably a good thing, because it fundamentally is the skill. It's about the skills that people need for work. And for me, that's what they call a grid issue. When an election comes around, if you don't have the skills for work, you can't participate in the economy fully. So I'm hopeful that, you know, maybe these big ideas will be taken to an election and we can have a pretty serious debate about them.
Luke Sheehy, I think that pretty much sums it all up. Thank you, sir. And we are at the beginning.
Steve.
We're at the beginning of a very, very long debate. I hope we're both there at the end of it.
Hopefully. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Luke.